Hello, History of St. Louis, and welcome to another lesson. In today's lesson, we're going to take a look at the Mississippi River as well as the steamboat era of St. Louis. So this combo lesson, the first part will be a fun little look at your knowledge of all things Mississippi River, which if you're like most students is going to be pretty lacking. And then we'll take a look at the historical era of steamboats in connection with St. Louis history. Um, that will be a little bit more knowledge based, whereas this first part is a little bit more fun based. So let's get cracking here. What's going to happen is we're going to give you a series of questions. Teacher's going to pause the video, let you think about the answer, and then you will discuss what the potential answer could be, and then we will unpause the video and you'll get to see what the answer was and see how off you were. So let's go ahead and begin. Question number one. In what state does the Mississippi River start, and in what state does the Mississippi River end? So think about where you think the Mississippi River starts from and give me a state, not a city, and give me the ending state, and again, not a city. Make sure you give me states for these two questions. So teacher, go ahead and push pause. Let the students think about it for a second, and then teacher will lead a quick discussion over what some of the potential answers are, and then we'll find out how well you did. All right, let's see how well you did for question number one. Here are your answers. For where does it begin? It is Minnesota. The picture that you see right here is the beginning of the Mississippi River in Minnesota. And in what state does it end? You've got Louisiana. Hopefully you did not give New Orleans, which of course is a city, not a state. So those are the two answers to begin with. How off were you? Did you have the Mississippi River traveling in the right direction? Did you have it flip-flop and traveling from the south to the north? I hope not. Were there any wacky states that students had the Mississippi River starting in? Those are all fun little discussions to have. All right, here we go. Question number two. In miles, how long is the Mississippi River from start to finish? And so I want this in miles. I will give you some reference points here. From the city of St. Louis to Kansas City is a little over 300 miles. So if you turn that and put that along the Mississippi River, that gives you a little bit of a reference point as to how long. So if Missouri is about 300 miles wide from St. Louis to Kansas City, how long is the Mississippi River from start to finish? Go ahead and give me that in miles. Teachers, you're going to pause, give students an attempt to guess, and then you'll go through their guesses and see how close or how off they are. So teachers, go ahead and press pause and let them discuss. All righty, let's go ahead and see what the answer actually is for this. The answer is 2,348 miles total. So from Lake Itasca, Minnesota, where it begins, to New Orleans, Louisiana, where it empties into the Gulf of Mexico, it is about 2,348 miles. How close? How off were you? I would say if you were within 100 miles, I would say that that's a pretty good guess. And finally, the last question, and this one will also demonstrate just how well you know your Midwest geography. There are 10 states that border the Mississippi River, that either run through the river or make it one of the borders. There are 10 states. What are those 10 states? We just went over two of them in an earlier question. And then I believe at minimum you should get another 2 based on where you live and where you're going to school. So at minimum, I think you should get a 4 out of 10 on this one. And hopefully you get a little bit better. So in just a second, teacher is going to pause and give you an opportunity to list all 10 states. You can abbreviate and then discuss who thinks they have all 10. Teachers then come back and let's see what it is. All right, let's go ahead and see how well you did with this uh, question. The answers are Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, Missouri, which I think everybody should have gotten, and you know that our next door neighbor is Illinois. Then you have a tough one here, Kentucky, because it's not very much. You also have Tennessee, you have Arkansas. We already went over Louisiana. And of course, if it has the name in its state, it's got to have the river, and that's Mississippi. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Those are your 10. How did you do? Again, 4 should have been your minimum. If you did not get at least 4, then shame on you and your knowledge of geography. If you were able to get all 10, then bonus points for you. Go ahead now and you're going to want to get out either some notebook paper to take some notes, or you're going to want to get onto a computer where you can digitally take some notes. But we're going to go over the age of the steamboat and document its history, the steamboat history with St. Louis history, and see how they connect. All right, so the first thing I'm going to have you do here is copy down these 4 years, 1817, 1827, 1831, and 1833. And then along with that year, you're going to document also how many steamboats came to St. Louis that year. So as you can see from your notes right here, in 1817, the first steamboat arrives in St. Louis. That steamboat is named the Zebulon Pike. It comes from Cincinnati, Ohio, I believe. And so in that year, we have just one. That's the only steamboat that arrives. 10 years later, you can see that we jump to 259 total steamboats that arrive in the St. Louis area. 4 years after that, we almost double, just under probably 30 to 40% increase to 432. And then from there, in 2 years, we increased to 573. So in this 16-year time span, we go from 1 to 573. That's a pretty dramatic increase in steamboat traffic. We will become the second busiest city with steamboat traffic, second only to New Orleans. So you're going to want to jot down these 2 little pieces of information in your notes. And with that increase in traffic, obviously, then you can increase business. You can also increase people coming here. And this is, as we said, this is going to start to fuel a huge increase in St. Louis population because businesses can move here and have goods transported a whole lot easier. And because the steamboat makes the river a 2-way highway, it allows for more people to come here from different areas. So hopefully you have all of that information down. This is what the St. Louis levee looks like. You can see that they, for some reason, started building the city right up to the riverfront and did not give themselves a whole lot of room in case of flooding. But they did that so that it was very easy to get stuff and material that is being unloaded from the steamboats quickly and easily into warehouses that were right along the river. And you can see here that the riverfront levee is just packed with steamboats. So this just shows you how important steamboat traffic was to the city of St. Louis. And basically, it was like the modern day airport uh, for the city of St. Louis. Here you can see a delivery of something inside of barrels, and you can see that the riverfront is just absolutely loaded with these barrels that would have then been delivered to the different warehouses right along. If you know anything about Laclede's Landing, you know that most of those buildings originally were built as warehouses for this sort of traffic and whatnot. And you can see in the background, you've got the Eads Bridge. Again, you can see here unloading apples from the Mississippi River packet boats. And so again, this is probably from the 1910s, 1920s. And again, you can still see that uh, they are using the steamboats, even though probably by this time it is less and less of use because of the new invention of the railroad. Once again, just another picture of downtown St. Louis. You can see again how close those warehouses are to the levee, which is now cobblestone, and then you've got all of your steamboats lined up. Okay, so with the increase in riverboat traffic, we're going to see some new industries and businesses pop up. One of those new industries is going to be the insurance industry. Since people own boats, you need to have insurance in case those boats sink or are damaged in some way, just like you have insurance for cars and boats and motorcycles and all sorts of things. They needed that as well. And so this would go not only to insure boats, but if you were shipping something on a boat, you could insure that item so that if the boat sank, you would at least get the cash value of whatever you were shipping. And we still do that today. If I am going to college and I am shipping my computer, say from St. Louis to Miami of Ohio, and on the way from St. Louis to Miami of Ohio, my computer gets damaged and I have it insured, I will get the monetary value of that computer so that I can go buy a new one. Why would ships go down? Why would they sink? The major reasons for these disasters were either snags in the river, logs, trees, other things that people might dump in the river. But after a storm, you have all sorts of things that go into the river. Or if you were going upriver and you had a boat that was overloaded in weight, you would basically make its engines run too hard, and that would put too much strain on them, and then they would actually burst and explode, and so you'd have bursting boilers. Boilers are the actual engines. And so those are your two main reasons why boats would sink in the Mississippi River at this time. The worst part of the Mississippi River, as far as steamboat accidents was from St. Louis to Cairo, Illinois. And you can see here on the map just where they are. Here is St. Louis, and then here's Cairo, Illinois. Because the Mississippi River and the Missouri River meet just north of St. Louis, when the Missouri River dumps into the Mississippi, it dumps all of its junk into the Mississippi, which increases the likelihood of stuff being in the river. And so that stretch from St. Louis to Cairo, Illinois is called the graveyard stretch. And it's called the graveyard stretch because 1 out of 6 ships in that area went down. And so you're going to want to jot down both the nickname and the fraction of ships that went down to prove why it was called the graveyard stretch. Why Cairo, Illinois? Because the Ohio River dumps into the Mississippi River at Cairo, and so you can see why this stretch is so much more problematic. The other business that will start to develop in the steamboat era is going to be salvaging. With ships going down, there are going to be people who develop technologies to either raise those boats back up and try to salvage them, or at least try to get stuff that was on the ship if it had somehow gotten off of the ship because the ship sunk and sort of destroyed and disintegrated the materials on it, or if you were shipping something on it, maybe you had the ability to bring it back up. Um, you would have that ability. And so basically, when a ship sunk, the owner of the ship would have 3 years to bring it up. After 3 years, then you lost the ownership of that property, and so then anybody could do it. One of the people who started making lots of money off of the salvaging business was a gentleman by the name of James Eads. James Eads is going to invent the diving bell. Basically, what the diving bell is during his time is if you take a barrel and flip it upside down so that the top of it, where the big hole is now facing downward, and you take an air hose and you attach it to the top of the barrel so that you are pumping air, and then you add weights to the outside of the barrel, you basically create a barrel in which you can stick your head in and you can breathe underwater. And then if you have it weighted enough, you can walk into the Mississippi River and down at the bottom of the Mississippi River. And though you can't see anything, you can feel for stuff along the bottom, or you can attach ropes to the ship and then have those ropes bring the ship back up through a series of machines and whatnot. And so James Eads made his early fortune in St. Louis inventing the diving bell and bringing up ships or bringing up material that were on ships. And this is going to begin his history of St. Louis and the Mississippi River. We're going to talk about him 2 more times in this course, dealing with his connection with the river and St. Louis. The average cost of a steamboat was $25,000 to $30,000. Your more elaborate ships were $60,000. What did you do on steamboats? You basically did what you do on a cruise ship. You eat, you can gamble, there is some entertainment, and then you just enjoy the scenery as you go up and down the river. From St. Louis, the big cities that you could connect to via steamboat cruises were Memphis and obviously New Orleans. If you were the owner of the ship, if you could make 4 to 5 round trips, you would basically pay off your boat. And then anything after that would be profit. The problem is that on the Mississippi River, the average lifespan was only about 5 years. And on the Missouri River, where it's smaller and faster and more junky, your boat would only last about 3 years. And so you had very limited time to make as much money as you could from these ships. But they still work today. There are some riverboat cruises in St. Louis. At the riverfront, you can take a 2-hour cruise that goes up and down the Mississippi River and just gives you a nice little view and tour of the Mississippi River area here in the St. Louis metropolitan area. And then there are some bigger cruises that you can take down and back up to New Orleans and Memphis, I believe. Some other major riverboat areas along here you can see St. Louis. Then off of the Ohio River, you got Louisville and Cincinnati. And then up in the Pittsburgh area, there are actually 3 rivers that come together. You also have Memphis and New Orleans below us. So those are just some of the cities that also share in riverboat history. Some scenes here from the Mississippi River and St. Louis. What causes the death of the steamboat in St. Louis history? Why does the steamboat come out of favor throughout our history? And it had a really good run. I would say it probably has a 50 to 60 year run as the major way in St. Louis. But what causes the death of the steamboat? You guessed it, it's going to be the railroad. And once James Eads, we're going to find out later on this unit, builds the Eads Bridge and connects the East Coast and the West Coast, St. Louis is going to be a major hub for the railroads as they connect here. Unfortunately for us, Chicago is going to be the major connector, and that is going to put Chicago ahead of us. But you can see here that the riverfront deals with the railroad by putting a elevated railroad track right in front of the warehouse district along the levee, so that it can run around the city of St. Louis. That railroad track is still there. It's just buried underground at the Arch Park. And so part of the reason why there is such a large embankment and large bluff in front of the St. Louis Arch is because there is a railroad that runs underground, and it is still there today. But the death of the steamboat is basically related to the development of the railroad. Here's another picture where you can see the elevated railroad track basically all along the riverfront. Again, you can see all of the warehouses. So this is before the arch grounds were about. You can see the pollution in the background makes it very hard to see things with all that. And you can see that buildings had advertisements on them on the sides. Some of those buildings you can still see shadows of those advertisements, but many of them have been painted over, or the buildings have been destroyed. The original buildings have been destroyed and replaced with other buildings. Once again, you can see the elevated railroad track here. You can see the old courthouse right here, and then the old cathedral right here. And so this gives you a good look at what the downtown warehouse district looked like. You still had some steamboats in the area, but you can see here that the railroad is alive and well. And then just to highlight some of the bridges in the St. Louis area. So here is your arch grounds right here. The Eads Bridge, which is right here, will be the first bridge to cross the Mississippi River at St. Louis, and will be built for not only railroad traffic, but eventually pedestrian traffic as well. Then you have the Poplar Street Bridge right here, which is the Highway 40 bridge that goes over the Mississippi River. Right here, you have one of the newest bridges in the St. Louis area. This is the Stan Musial Veterans Bridge, which takes Highway 70 across the river. You have some other bridges that are not as well used, the MLK Bridge, and then just upriver off camera here, you would have the old chain of rocks and then the new chain of rocks. The new chain of rocks would be for Highway 270 crossing the river. And then way down here, having Highway 270 South cross at the Jefferson Barracks Bridge. So there are a number of bridges that can take you across the Mississippi River. These just highlight some of those. Washington Avenue is what now you can cross at the Eads Bridge. So that's a little look at the river history and the Mississippi history of St. Louis. I hope you enjoyed today's lesson and hope you learned something.